What's up guys? Today I want to explain how you can make 400 horsepower out of a Mazda speed motor, whether it's a Mazda speed 3 or speed 6 motor. For a lot of platforms, whether it's like a Subaru STI or Evo, these bolt-ons, or basically the components that I'm about to tell you what you need to make the 400 horsepower, they're pretty similar along all the platforms, so you can pretty much follow this guide for most platforms, but I'm talking specifically for a Mazda Speed 3 and Mazda Speed 6. Alright, before we get started, if you guys have any questions at the end of the video, you can always comment, or you can find me through my Instagram or Facebook. I'll leave them in the description below, but you can follow me there, and then we can talk about any questions you have, or I can try to help you with any problems you're having. But yeah, both my Instagram and Facebook will be in the description below. Alright guys, if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, is it even possible to make 400 horsepower on a stock internally motor, which means basically without touching anything on the inside of the motor. You're only doing bolt-ons, you're only doing the stuff you can get to without pulling the motor out, such as like an intake or downpipe, stuff like that. And yes, it is possible. It's actually not too hard. 400 horsepower is about the limit of what you can do on a stock Mazda speed motor, internally at least, before you have to do forged internals and stuff like that. But that's a different video. So yes, it's possible to have 400 horsepower and still a stock motor and do it reliably. You probably will be around 370, 360 wheel torque, but 400 horsepower is 400 horsepower. That would be crazy. If you are a little lost on where to start, it's okay. I was lost at 1.2, still am a little bit lost, at least for that matter. But the first thing you'll probably want to start out with, if you have a 400 horsepower goal in mind, is you're going to want to start with a Cobb axis port or some type of tuner. There's a few different companies out there that make tuners, but the Cobb axis port is what I have, and it's probably the easiest to use and the most user-friendly. It's basically like a handheld device that you plug into your OBD2 port, and your OBD2 port is just a little plug under your dash. It's really easy to hook up and everything. Anyone could do that. It takes like 2 seconds. If you're going for any kind of power, you'll need some way to tune it, some way to control the car. Usually a professional tuner will do the tune for you and everything, but you need a Cobb axis port to see how your car is running and also to be able to load those tunes. So probably the first thing I would get is a Cobb axis port. It's not necessarily the first thing you need, but if you're going for that 400 horsepower goal in mind, you're definitely going to need some type of tuner. One quick modification that gets overlooked is the blow-off valve. You're definitely going to want an aftermarket blow-off valve, such as probably a GFB or a cork sport blow-off valve or a Cobb blow-off valve. There's a lot of different companies that make them, but basically you just want one that's high quality and can hold the boost, because that's what relieves the boost or the pressure in the intercooler pipes when you're off the throttle, because you don't want your turbo pushing air in when you're not trying to go fast. So you basically want something to relieve the pressure in the intercooler pipes, and the stock blow-off valve, it just can't hold the pressure once you get to about 20 psi or 20 pounds of boost. So you need something that can hold a little bit more pressure and let you get to that 400 horsepower goal. Guys, after the axis port, it's time to start adding some mods, try to get the car a little bit more alive. And so if you are just buying everything all at once, then the decision will be easy. But if you're like me and you're buying stuff like one at a time, or like most people, it's going to be hard to choose what you get first, but you're probably going to get all the parts in the end anyway, so it's no big deal. Starting with the intake side, you need at least a 3.5 inch intake to hit that 400 horsepower goal. Probably a 4-inch intake would be ideal, but for that goal you don't really need anything bigger than a 3.5 inch intake. The intake's the part that sucks in the air, as you guys probably know, and you just want that to be as least restrictive as possible and also allow the most airflow possible. So it's really good to have a 3.5 inch or a 4-inch intake, which of course that's referring to the diameter of the intake. On Mazda speed motors, you have an inlet pipe, a turbo inlet pipe, which is basically just an extension of the intake. I deleted the turbo inlet pipe and just got one solid intake that completes that whole thing. I recommend doing that. It's a lot easier to deal with. It's more reliable. You don't get boost leaks as easily that way through your intake. So definitely would go to a solid intake. The one I recommend is a HTP intake, whether it's a 3.5 inch or a 4-inch. That's up to you. I would always just go bigger because there's no drawback to it. But once you have the intake down, you're going to want to deal with the intake manifold. The intake manifold is what distributes the air from the turbo into the motor. So the intake manifold is basically the 4 runners, the last 4 individual runners that are dispersing the air into each individual cylinder in the motor. And so for the stock manifold, the stock intake manifold, it's pretty bad in terms of flow. So you're gonna wanna either upgrade it or port and polish it. If you're going for just 400 horsepower, porting and polishing is just fine. That'll be plenty. You can get like 500, 550 wheel horsepower out of a ported and polished stock intake manifold. If you want your engine bay to maybe look a little bit nicer and have just a little bit better flow, a JMF intake manifold or just any other aftermarket manifold that fits a Mazda Speed platform is probably good. The JMF manifold is just ideal for a built motor or for like 500 horsepower plus. But if you're going for 400, probably a ported and polished intake manifold is the best way to go. You could leave it stock, but I don't think you'll quite hit the 400 horsepower mark, and it also will be a lot more difficult to make that power. So you might as well just port and polish it. It's pretty easy to do. I have a video on that. Or you can have someone do it. It's usually like $100 or $150, so no big deal. But ported intake manifold is definitely probably a must. After you guys are done with the intake stuff, you're probably gonna wanna get motor mounts at some point. Like I said, if you're just getting it all at once, it doesn't really matter the order you do it in, but motor mounts are definitely a crucial component to have. So the stock motor mounts are trying to get rid of any vibration from the motor, so they're really soft. They let the motor move quite a bit. Upgraded motor mounts are usually a lot more solid and a lot stiffer, so you'll get a tiny bit more vibration, which I kind of enjoy, to be honest. It's not that big of a deal. Kind of lets you know there's something there under the hood, but you're definitely going to want to upgrade the passenger motor mount and the rear motor mount, as well as probably the transmission motor mount. Those are probably the like absolute bare minimum you can go. I believe there's one more side motor mount that you'd want to do, but yeah, just taking care of all your motor mounts is a good idea. It'll make sure the motor doesn't rock as much, plus you'll get a little bit better throttle response. Now that you have the access port, the intake, and the motor mounts done, you're gonna probably wanna move to exhaust. But right before you move to exhaust, you're probably gonna wanna get the high pressure fuel pumps done. You're definitely gonna wanna get the high pressure fuel pump internals done before you start adding power, just because when you get to that higher end of the RPMs, like 5,000 to 7,000 RPMs, the fuel pump, the stock high pressure fuel pump, is just not quite enough, and it's inconsistent in whether it delivers enough fuel. So you're gonna wanna upgrade those. I have Auto Tech high pressure fuel pump internals, I believe it's called, but I believe Cobb makes them or Cork Sport makes them. They're just a must. It doesn't really matter what company you go with, but you have to get high pressure fuel pump internals. There's no way you'll even get above stock really if you don't have those. So it's kind of a sucky part to do, but you gotta have those. So high pressure fuel pump internals, and then you can start going for power. So once you move to exhaust, you got your downpipe, your catback, and then your exhaust manifold. So I like a catless downpipe because it's the cheapest, and it's nice to have just, you know, no cat in there or anything. It's definitely the cheapest way to go. You can get a downpipe for like $120. from eBay or Amazon. And since it's just the pipe, it's just the downpipe has no technology, nothing. It's just strictly a pipe. That's all it is. It's just getting exhaust away from the turbo, away from your engine, and eventually out of the car. So the downpipe, if you go catless, just go for the cheapest $120 downpipe, I believe it is. You can get it on Amazon or eBay, just because it'll increase flow quite a bit, and there's no reason to spend a lot of money on a simple pipe. Now, if you're going catless, or excuse me, if you're going catted downpipe, you're definitely going to want to spend the big bucks, because the catted downpipe, you're going to want a high flow cat, which allows you for all the benefits of an aftermarket downpipe, as well as no drawbacks. So having that little cat in there, it'll use the technology that you're spending your money on. Basically, you're using all that expensive downpipe technology to have like a high flow cat in there. If you have like a cheaper cat, or if you just get a cheap downpipe that's catted, or even the stock downpipe that's catted, that cat is just so much restriction. It's hard to flow any exhaust out of there, and it'll just cut your gains in horsepower down like so much. So you're definitely going to want to upgrade your downpipe. I recommend catless just because it's cheaper, and you don't have anything to deal with. The catted downpipe is just as good, but it's a lot more expensive. It's like $100 for the catless, and it's like $600 for a catted downpipe. So kind of a big deal. I recommend catless, but catted is fine as well. If you guys like this video, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. I'll definitely have more content soon. If you guys have any questions, or if I left anything out, be sure to put it in the comments, and I'll definitely respond to you guys. I'll catch you guys next time.